Imagine this. Your child is just born. A doctor looks you straight in the eye and says with a cold certainty, "I'm sorry. Your baby is totally blind. There is no hope." What would you do? Would you accept the verdict and live under its shadow forever? Or would you dare to ask the forbidden question, what if they're wrong? This isn't fiction. It's the story of Isabella Johnson, a woman the world dismissed as just the maid. But her hands, her patience, her relentless recording of the smallest details forced one of the most powerful medical voices in the city to bend, and lit a path not only for 2 children but for families everywhere. The night lay heavy over Manhattan, a million lights stitched across velvet dark. Inside a penthouse high above the city, Isabella sat cross-legged on the floor, a laptop balanced on her knees. In front of her, the twins Michael and Gabriel breathed softly, their faces tilted toward the faint glow that slipped in from the hallway. Isabella typed with quiet precision, "Trial 3, slit width, 1 centimeter, ambient lux, 37, occlusion, 50%, latency, 480, miss." She wasn't a scientist. She had no medical degree. Yet the care in her observations rivaled any clinical report. She looked up, pinched the curtain open a fraction. A thin blade of morning light stretched across the carpet. Gabriel stirred, his eyelids fluttered, then his head turned just slightly, but not by chance. Michael shifted too, then whispered a single word, soft but clear. "Stop." Isabella's lips curved. "Good. When you're tired, you can stop. The light should never hurt you. It should be gentle." She wrote it down. Every response, every repetition, every piece of proof that the children's world was not as dark as the doctors had declared. Just months earlier, the Hamilton family had sat inside a hospital consultation room, the air sharp with antiseptic. On the wall hung posters plastered with diagrams of the brain. Dr. Henry Collins, a man with steel-gray hair and a voice that carried authority like a weapon, had signed his report in a single stroke. Both children, total cortical blindness, no functional light perception, further testing unnecessary. Those words fell like a gavel. Final. Absolute. Parents nodded numbly, specialists deferred. Because Collins was Collins, the expert, the authority, the one nobody questioned. But Isabella had noticed things. She had seen Gabriel recoil when sunlight bounced off a silver spoon in the kitchen. She had seen Michael flinch when the living room lamp flared too bright. If they were truly totally blind, why would their faces shift at light and shadow? To the outside world, Isabella was the maid. A black woman in a rich man's home, folding laundry, wiping counters. But to the twins, she was their first teacher. She taught them the word stop, gave them power over their own comfort. She turned rays of sunlight into games, open, close, brighter, darker. She measured their reactions with the discipline of a lab researcher. Slit width, lux levels, response times. Day after day, Michael began to angle his face toward warm beams. Gabriel laughed at the sun puddles that slid across the floor. They weren't experiments anymore. They were evidence. Evidence that refused to die quietly. Evidence Collins would rather ignore. One night, Richard Hamilton, the boy's father, walked into the kitchen. Isabella sat at the table, laptop open, folders of video clips and notes piled like armor. Richard's eyes scanned the rows of numbers, then rested on her face. His voice was rough. "Do you really think they can see?" She didn't hesitate. Not everything, not clearly, but yes, there is light. More than that, they know when to stop. That's self-control. That's not coincidence. That's hope. Richard swallowed hard, pressing a hand against his mouth. For years he had obeyed the experts, closing the curtains, dimming the home, protecting the boys from the very thing that might help them. His voice broke as he whispered, "Then we fight. We don't let anyone tell us our children are totally blind when light is still here." The next morning, Isabella opened the curtains a little wider. A golden patch spread across the floor. Gabriel clapped his hands. "Sun puddle," he shouted, running to stand in it. Michael stomped his feet in the glow, laughing. "It's warm. Pretend." Isabella stood still, eyes stinging. She pressed her palm to her heart. That moment, their laughter, their recognition, was worth more than 1,000 diagnoses. "Light can be gentle," she whispered, "and gentleness will defeat prejudice." But across the city, Henry Collins was staring at a different kind of light, the blue glow of his phone. On the screen, Isabella's clips replayed in a loop. His jaw tightened. His lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. He typed quickly to an editor. "Push the reckless Maid angle tonight. Leak the old reports. Frame it as child endangerment." The reply came at once. "On it." Collins set the phone down. He thought he had moved another pawn across the board. What he didn't know was that Isabella had already placed her first queen. A woman with no degree, no title, no power, armed only with a notebook, a laptop, and 2 children who had learned the strength of saying stop. The city outside never slept. Reporters wrote. Lawyers prepared. Collins plotted. But in the penthouse, something much stronger than authority was being born. Not miracles, not false hope. Just evidence. Data. And the quiet kind of love that teaches autonomy. One soft beam of light at a time. And that is where the fight began. 2 children chasing sun puddles in their living room. A woman dismissed as a maid writing down numbers in the dark. A father daring to believe again. A doctor scheming to silence them before the truth could spread. What no one realized yet was that those tiny shafts of light slipping through the curtains would ignite a battle big enough to shake the foundations of medicine, media, and justice itself. What if the story you trusted, the one written by specialists in white coats, wasn't the truth at all? What if buried in the hospital's own files was proof they ignored, proof they even tried to erase? Tonight, we're not talking about miracles. We're talking about data, hard numbers, audit logs, and the woman who refused to look away. It began on a quiet Tuesday. Isabella was uploading another set of clips to her laptop. In the videos, Michael sat by the window, his face tilting toward a shaft of sunlight. She whispered, darker, sliding her hand across the beam. His head shifted back instantly. The word stop came softly, but the timing was precise, measurable, repeatable. Isabella paused the video, zooming in on the timestamp. 480 milliseconds. Not chance, not random. She logged it carefully. Then her inbox chimed. The sender's name was hidden behind a string of numbers. The subject line, light perception flag suppressed. Isabella frowned and clicked. The email was short, unsigned. I was on the neonatal team. Early LP was marked. We were told to drop it. Audit logs prove it. Not safe to reveal more. Stay careful. Attached were screenshots, internal records, timestamped entries, and the phrase, possible LP response, highlighted in yellow. In the margin, a comment, team later concluded inconsequential. But beneath that, the audit trail showed something else. A deletion. Someone had removed the entry weeks later. The initials matched a name Isabella already knew, H. Collins. Her pulse hammered. She forwarded the files to Richard, then dialed Malik. The lawyer's voice was calm, deliberate. Audit logs don't lie. If those entries were erased, that's not just oversight, that's liability. That's a cover-up. Richard's hands shook as he scrolled through the screenshots. For 7 years he had carried the weight of Collins's word, totally blind. He whispered, almost to himself, all this time, and he knew. That evening, Isabella set up another trial in the living room. Curtains drawn, single slit open, stopwatch ready. Gabriel leaned forward, his small hands gripping the edge of the couch. Isabella held up a yellow filter. What color, baby? Gabriel's head tilted, pupils shrinking ever so slightly. Brighter. She smiled, marked it down, then switched to blue. His lips pressed together, he whispered, "Darker." Richard watched from the doorway. His voice cracked. "They see. They really do." But, across town, in a quiet office lit by a single desk lamp, Collins stared at his computer screen. Isabella's data was circulating now, email threads between parents, whispered mentions in support groups. Families were beginning to question their own diagnoses. Collins typed furiously, "Frame the routines as dangerous, suggest psychological harm. Keep it, experts say." His editor replied, "Reckless Maid package nearly ready." The next morning, the first hit piece landed online. The headline screamed, "Unlicensed housekeeper runs blindness experiments on billionaire's twins." The article dismissed Isabella's work as pseudoscience, painting Richard as a desperate father manipulated by false hope. Clips of the children's responses were cut, stripped of context, spun as confusion. Richard slammed his laptop shut. "They're calling you a maid," he muttered, his jaw clenched. Isabella sat still, her voice low. "They've always called me that. But names don't erase the data. They can smear me all they want. They can't smear physics." Dr. Anna Brooks, a pediatric neurologist who had quietly reviewed Isabella's notes, stepped forward. She carried with her pages of graphs and waveform charts. In her hands, Isabella's careful documentation had become clinical evidence. Pupil constriction present, optokinetic response present, VEP waveforms reliable, FST thresholds measurable. This is not parental fantasy. This is neurophysiology. Richard looked at her, a question trembling on his lips. "Will they listen?" Anna hesitated. "If they don't, then the problem isn't science, it's power." Isabella kept writing. Trial after trial. Constant slit width, measured lux, consistent latency. She wrote until the numbers formed a shield no headline could puncture. Still, she knew what was coming. Collins wasn't just defending a diagnosis, he was defending his reputation, his empire of authority. Late one night, as Manhattan hummed outside, Isabella sat at her desk with her journal. She wrote slowly, her pen pressing deep into the paper. Day -2 before case conference. Light is present. Prejudice is present. We will let evidence walk ahead of fear. Then she closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the city's glow fall across her face. Somewhere, deep in her chest, belief had found a safe place to sleep. But belief wasn't enough. Evidence would have to fight. And the fight was about to leave the quiet of the penthouse and step into the cold, merciless light of the boardroom. The state medical board scheduled a hearing. Complaints had been filed, Collins's hand obvious in the wording. Unlicensed practice, risk to minors, false hope. The board would decide whether Isabella's routines would be banned, whether the curtains would close again, whether the light itself would be taken away. Friday, 1:45 p.m. The conference room gleamed like steel. Leather chairs, a long wooden table, the tick of a clock slicing the silence. At one end sat Dr. Patel, chair of the board, her eyes sharp, her tone clipped. Beside her, Dr. Freeman and 2 commissioners. Across the table, Collins and his lawyer in a gray suit. To the side, Anna Brooks with folders of evidence, Richard and Isabella sitting stiff, a USB drive between them like a fragile heart. Patel's voice was cool. "We are here to review allegations of unlicensed medical practice and risk to minors, and to consider a temporary stop on home routines." Collins's lawyer rose, voice smooth as oil. "Our position is simple. 15 specialists confirmed total cortical blindness. Now, a housekeeper conducts unproven procedures, confusing children, risking trauma. This is not science. It is false hope." His words lingered, heavy, deliberate. Then Patel turned. "Dr. Collins, you may speak." Collins folded his hands. Cortical blindness often shows random head turns. Parent videos are subjective, unreliable. Any perceived discrimination of light is coincidence. Nothing more. Dr. Freeman leaned forward. "Dr. Collins, your own neonatal note flagged possible light perception. Why was it never followed up? Collins blinked. The team concluded it was inconsequential. Do you have documentation of that follow-up? A pause, a glance at his attorney, then, we consolidated reports. The air thickened. Patel turned her gaze toward Anna. Dr. Brooks. Anna rose, sliding her evidence across the table. Her voice was steady. We performed objective tests. Pupillary light response, optokinetic nystagmus, visual evoked potentials, full field stimulus thresholds. Results were consistent. These are not impressions. These are measurable responses. Our estimate, 30% functional vision. She clicked the remote. On the screen, a video played. A shaft of light on the carpet. Two faces turned. A hand shadow blocked half the beam. One child spoke. Darker. The clip ended. Silence. Anna closed her laptop. Denying this would be denying physics. The room held its breath. Richard gripped Isabella's hand under the table. Collins's jaw set like stone. And just as Patel lifted her pen to make the first notes, Isabella straightened her back. She had been silent until now. But her voice was ready, and the city would hear it. What if the one voice no one expected to matter became the one that could not be ignored? In a room filled with doctors, lawyers, and commissioners, the last to speak was the woman Collins had spent weeks trying to erase. He called her a maid, a reckless amateur, a danger. But when Isabella stood, the silence bent toward her. Her palms pressed flat against the wood, her back straight. She looked at the board, then at Collins. I'm a black woman from Brooklyn, she said, her voice measured, steady. I'm a care worker who has spent years watching, listening, and documenting. First with my brother, now with these children. At home, we don't do treatment. We do play. Documented, consent-based, repeatable. When the boys say stop, we stop. No glare. No pain. Light can be gentle. Collins's lawyer leaned forward, eyes cold. How many degrees do you have, Miss Johnson? His tone hissed like a trap. Isabella didn't blink. Enough to know when a child says, stop, we stop. Enough to keep records. The rest, Dr. Brooks covers. A small ripple of laughter broke out from the commissioners. Patel's pen tapped once against the table. Counselor, she said sharply, this is a question of practice, not pedigree. Freeman leaned in, voice firm. We have objective tests. Pupillary constriction, optokinetic responses, clear visual evoked potentials, detectable thresholds. We also have something troubling, an early neonatal note suggesting light perception. It was never followed up. That omission changed the course of 2 lives. Patel conferred quietly with the board, then lifted her head. Our interim decision. 1. Deny the cease and desist request. 2. Permit continuation of home routines under Dr. Brooks's supervision. 3. Open investigation into the initial diagnostic process, particularly the lack of follow-up. 4. Recommend diagnostic language, avoid absolutes where doubt remains. The words dropped like stones in water, rippling across the table. Richard exhaled, his shoulders sagging with relief. Anna squeezed Isabella's hand under the table. But Collins's face hardened, his phone already lighting up beneath the desk. He typed fast, almost frantic. Segment airs tonight. Add risk of psychological harm. Push reckless Maid angle harder. Outside, cameras waited. Reporters surged forward. Miss Johnson, do you feel out of your depth as a housekeeper meddling in medical matters? Isabella stared straight into the lens. I don't do medicine, she said calmly. I do listening. And today, the board listened too. Another reporter turned to Anna. Doctor, do you endorse a housekeeper leading home routines? Anna's answer was flat, cutting. I endorse caregivers who follow clinical plans, collect data, and honor consent. Titles don't move pupils, light does. On the steps, a young mother stepped out of the crowd, clutching a boy against her chest. Her eyes were red. Mr. Hamilton, Miss Johnson, My son was also called totally blind. But when I cracked the curtain, he turned his face to the Sunday they told me I was imagining. She held out her phone on the shaky video. The child lifted his head, smiling into a beam of light. Isabella's eyes burned. She took the phone gently, whispering, "We see you." Behind her, two more parents raised tentative hands. A seed had been planted. The first stirrings of something larger than one case. That night, at 8 sharp, the broadcast rolled. The chyron screamed, "Billionaire's twins in unproven experiments." Clips were cut mercilessly, Isabella's voice about consent and gentle light stripped away, replaced with a distorted expert warning of trauma. The segment lingered on the word Maid until it felt like a brand. Richard switched off the TV, his jaw tight. "They turned you into a villain." Isabella sat quietly, notebook in her lap. "No. They turned me into a story. But stories can be rewritten." She opened her pen and drew 2 new columns. One for positive associations, light paired with music, praise, safety. Another for stop words so the boys could practice halting the session whenever they felt discomfort. Evidence was her armor, and she knew the war was on more than one battlefield now. The next morning the knock came, 2 men in gray suits, badges flashing at the door. "State Medical Board investigations," one said curtly. "Dr. Hale, this is Mr. Klein. We require immediate entry." Isabella accepted the card, eyes scanning with the precision of someone who had trained herself to notice the smallest of details. The engraving was shallow, the hotline number italicized, off by a digit. She dialed anyway. On the line, the real Dr. Freeman answered, his voice sharp. "No one named Hale or Klein is on my team. Don't let them in." Isabella looked up, calm as glass. "The board confirms no appointment. Please leave." The taller man bristled. "Who are you to refuse?" Richard stepped forward, voice steel. "I'm the homeowner. Security." Guards arrived, escorting the imposters out as the elevator doors snapped shut. Celia leaned against the wall, exhaling hard. Richard turned to Isabella. "You spotted the card." She shrugged softly. "Prejudice loves to travel under a badge. We shouldn't trust authority just because it wears metal." But the storm was far from over. That afternoon Anna called. Her tone was brisk, edged with warning. "The board has scheduled a case conference this Friday. Collins will push for an injunction to halt home sessions. I'll bring the data. You bring logs, clips, and if necessary, witnesses." Richard gripped the phone tighter. "We'll be ready." That night, Isabella set out a filter set thin yellow film, pale blue film, no vague talk about warm or cool light. Actual tests. She held the yellow in front of the slit. "Does this feel brighter?" Gabriel tilted his head. "Yes, brighter." She swapped to blue. Michael whispered, "Dimmer." Isabella logged it with care. No conclusions yet, no credit claimed. Just evidence mapping its own terrain. The following day, the media trucks were already circling the block. Cameras swiveled, microphones thrust forward. "Miss Johnson, are you experimenting on children?" Isabella's voice was calm, almost tired. "We don't experiment, we listen. We run gentle, documented sensory play under a hospital plan. Hope isn't cruel when it's measured." She didn't linger for rebuttals. More words would only be sliced apart in editing bays. That night, Michael placed a small hand on her notebook. "Miss Isabella, will they stop us?" She knelt, eyes level with his. "No one can take away what you already felt. Even if they pause us, the light will still be here. And we'll return to it." Gabriel whispered, "Can we show them the way the shadow moves?" Isabella smiled softly. "We will. And we'll record the evidence. As much as you want." She opened her laptop, attaching logs and clips to Anna's email. Outside, Manhattan buzzed with headlights and sirens, stories being written in real time. Inside the penthouse, Isabella's pen scrawled the night's final line. Day 0 after the board hearing. Light is present, prejudice is louder, but data speaks. And when data speaks, power will have to answer. And far across the city, in a dimly lit office, Collins hit send on another email to his editor. Tomorrow, we escalate. What if the smallest voices could bring the mightiest system to its knees? The courtroom was packed, air thick with tension. On one side, Collins sat with his lawyer's eyes sharp as blades, ready to defend his empire. On the other, Richard, Isabella, Anna Brooks, Ava Reynolds, Malik Carter, and the boys, waiting quietly with Celia in the back row. Cameras buzzed outside. Headlines were already written, but what mattered now was truth. Ava stood first, calm, precise. This is not a lawsuit against science. This is a demand that science be practiced with honesty and dignity. Audit logs don't lie. Neither do the children. She laid out the timeline, neonatal note, recording possible light perception. Then, weeks later, the deletion, the shift to total blindness. Emails with directives. Don't confuse parents with LP. Keep it simple. Total. The jury scribbled notes. Collins shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Malik played the clips. Shadows sliding across a wall. Michael whispering, darker. Gabriel smiling when the light turned gentle. The special master explained the statistics. If this were random, responses wouldn't repeat with such consistency. Latency times are decreasing. Endurance is improving. This is measurable functional vision. Then Anna Brooks testified. Calm, authoritative. Objective tests confirm about 30% functional vision. I prescribed home routines under consent. To stop them now would cause harm, not help. Collins's lawyer sneered. Doctor, do you endorse a housekeeper leading a program? Anna looked directly at him. I endorse caregivers trained to follow a plan and collect data. Titles don't move pupils. Light does. A hush fell across the courtroom. Next came Olivia Park. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. I was told, don't confuse parents with LP. We erased hope on paper before even testing. Children flinched under harsh lights when they could have been offered gentleness. She held up the job offer from another hospital. I didn't lose work. I would have lost my conscience. Finally, Isabella walked to the stand. She stood tall, eyes calm, hands clasped. The lawyer leaned in with a cruel smirk. Do you realize you're only a... The judge slammed the gavel. Counselor, enough. Isabella spoke simply. I don't heal diseases. I listen. I document. I teach children to say stop, so they know they have control. I opened a slit in the curtain. Light did the rest. Her words seemed to linger in the room, heavier than any credential. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreperson's voice was clear. On negligent misdiagnosis, we find the defendant liable. On systemic pattern and practice causing harm, liable. On defamation against Isabella Johnson, liable. Remedies, compensatory and punitive damages, public correction orders, mandatory anti-bias training, independent audits, and creation of a gentle light fund for children misdiagnosed under similar conditions. Collins slumped, his empire cracked. Richard gripped Isabella's hand, his face wet with quiet relief. Ava and Malik exchanged the smallest of smiles. The right thing had landed at last. Weeks later, television aired a correction. We retract the phrase reckless Maid. We apologize to Isabella Johnson, to the Hamilton family, and to the caregiver community. The same anchor who had once sneered now spoke with measured contrition. At home, Michael and Gabriel sat at the table with markers. Dad, I want to draw the sun puddles, Gabriel said. Michael added, and the kite dot. They pressed colors onto paper, messy but radiant. Richard leaned in the doorway, smiling the kind of smile he thought he had lost 7 years ago. Anna's case series was accepted by a respected journal, complete with logs, videos, and charts. The medical board issued new guidelines. No absolutes when light perception is possible. At least 3 independent opinions before declaring congenital blindness. Mandatory anti-bias training for ophthalmologists. Olivia Park received a commendation for ethics in practice. At school intake, Michael whispered shyly, I can tell brighter or darker. Gabriel waved a hand toward the window. I can find the kite outside. Teachers laughed, touched, as the boys began a new chapter with accommodations written into their plan. On a weekend afternoon, the family gathered in Central Park. Celia unpacked apple pie. Martha poured tea. A small speaker played Coltrane. Isabella spread a blanket, laying contrast cards beside toys, not experiments now, just woven into life. Gabriel chased kite dots across the grass. Michael stopped when his eyes tired, whispered, "Stop," then laughed, and carried on. A young mother approached, clutching her son. "Miss Johnson, my boy also turned to the Sunday. Thank you for making the world admit it out loud." Isabella knelt, touched her shoulder gently. Light can be gentle. That night, Isabella closed her notebook, its final page written in a hand both tired and proud. Science does not hate black hands, prejudice does. When science speaks, prejudice shrinks. She set the pen down, listening to the boys whisper in their sleep. Sun puddles, kites, and dreams brighter than any headline. Outside, Manhattan shimmered with a million lights. But in the penthouse, the only ones that mattered were the soft beams the boys had learned to greet and the word they had learned to say. Stop. Autonomy, born from gentleness. A force prejudice could not erase. And with that, the story ended not with noise, but with light, steady, enduring, and free.